I don't like these movies.
Get real.
And I saw that movie 20 goddamn times!
Just consume fodder. I watch Wild Movies. Yeah, Wild Movies are the best movies.
Having so much fun and really?
No, this movie's too complicated.
So once again, no smoking in this theater.
When you were mentioning 2001 Citizen Kane, you forgot to add Drive. We'll let that slip.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Idle Film Club, your brain rock girlfriend's favourite film podcast. I'm Callum.
And I'm Gio.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fine, thank you. Ready to talk about some fantastic cinema today. We are talking about two films by a wonderful Danish man named Nicholas Winding Refn.
You go, Nick.
He's one of my faves. He's my bias of Danish filmmaking. He's a bit of a nutter.
The only thing that's a shame is that there's no Mads in any of these movies.
No, surprisingly not, because at this point in his career, his muse had changed from Mads to Ryan.
Right, hello, right.
Hello, Rye.
So yeah, if you don't know, just a bit of background on the man we are covering today. We're covering two of his movies, Only God Forgives and The Neon Demon, which are his last two features he's made. He is a Danish filmmaker. He's most famous for the film Drive from 2011, which I'm sure most of you have seen, because everyone in the world loves Drive, because it's a fantastic film.
I don't carry a gun. I drive.
Pre-Drive, he did Bronson with Tom Hardy, the Pusher trilogy with Mads Mikkelsen, Valhalla Rising, Fear X.
Yeah, I mean, going into this, you're a much, much bigger fan of Refn than I am. I like Drive well enough. I've seen both of these movies a long, long time ago. Only seen each of them the once, so this was a bit of a refresher for me. You love Only God Forgives, but you've seen The Neon Demon twice?
This was my second watch of Neon
Oh, it was your
Demon.
second
Yeah,
watch?
I've only seen it once before, whereas Only God Forgives, this might have been my sixth or fifth or something like that.
Yeah, so basically how we're structuring this episode is these two films were released sort of in chronology in Refn's catalogue. You will see why he has not released anything after these movies once we get into the details of them. So Callum's going to start off the episode talking about his movie and we're going to share our thoughts. Obviously, being the expert of this movie out of the two, this is going to mainly rely on your research and then we will go into my film.
So we're going to kick this off with 2013's Only God Forgives.
I don't understand you. And I never will.
It had a $4.8 million budget, which is pretty standard for Refn, and it got $10 million at the box office. Sits at a 5.7 on IMDb, 37 out of 100 on Metascore, and a 41% on Rotten Tomatoes. Don't listen to critics, because they're not always right. It was distributed by Scambox and Wildside Films. All of it was shot in Thailand, either in Bangkok or the outskirts of Bangkok. I think it is a Lynchian nightmare of a movie. I think it's shot wonderfully. I think it takes its time. It reminds me of Blue Velvet or something like that, where it's weirdly sexy, but also kind of disturbing. Everything is very quiet. There's not a lot of dialogue in this movie. Ryan Gosling has 17 lines in total.
It's a little more complicated than that, Mother.
I'll give you a bit of the background of the plot of the movie. I'm not going to spoil it. And also, there is not a lot of plot to spoil in Only God Forgives. Ryan Gosling plays Julian, and him and his brother Billy run a Muay Thai boxing club in Bangkok as a front for drug dealing. Julian's brother Billy rapes and kills a 16-year-old girl at a brothel. The police are called, and Chang, who is the police lieutenant, offers Billy to the father of the girl as revenge. So the father kills Billy brutally as revenge for killing and raping his daughter. Then Chang, the police lieutenant, takes the father out of the town and cuts off his hands as punishment for letting his daughter go into sex work and as a reminder to not let his other daughters go into sex work.
With an awesome blade.
The rest of the film involves Julian's mother, Crystal, trying to find and kill those involved with Billy's death.
Did you get the guy that did it?
And at the same time, Chang, the police lieutenant, is trying to find who murdered the father of the girl, as the father ends up getting killed, and trying to find out who is after Chang himself. And that's pretty much the film. what did you think of Only God Forgives before our rewatch?
I absolutely hated this movie so much. The first time I watched it, I didn't get it. I thought it was boring. I'm pretty sure I fell asleep intentionally so that I could stop watching it.
And on rewatch?
So I've been keeping this opinion from you secret all week.
After the film, I was like, oh, so what do you think? What do you think of Only God Forgives? And you was like, I'm not going to tell you till we record the podcast. And that was a couple days ago now, and I'm really curious as to what you think.
I'm gonna make myself look like a complete mug. This might be one of my favourite films.
It's so good, isn't it? It's so fucking good.
Amazing.
It's one of the best films ever.
It is so good. I loved every second. watching
Really?
it.
Oh, that's so
I
good.
loved it. You were not excited going into this episode, and I was like, you're going to love the fact that I love this movie now.
Ah,
I
wow. I'm so. I
genuinely-
thought you were going to say, oh, it's all right.
I loved it.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
I absolutely loved it.
So tell me what you love about Only God Forgives.
What's not to love? It's violent, it's sexy, it's just how I like a man to be. A man who knows how to shut the fuck up. And he's a bit mental.
Yeah, so Gosling's character Julian has 17 lines in total in this movie.
Crazy.
He's a very complicated character. He is torn between two women, his mother and his sex worker girlfriend, who pretty much exist in the same place in his mind.
Yeah.
Why do you let her treat you like that?
Because she's my mother.
I think the last thing that I will say, controversial opinion, I enjoyed this more than Drive.
I think it's a better movie than Drive.
We rewatched Drive recently, and it's good, but I think this movie is much better.
Drive made about 80 million at the box office. Drive was a sleeper hit.
And people love that movie. Like, even people who don't like Nick Refn, who don't like Style Over Substance movies, it has a good plot. It's got a wholesome plot. The music's great. It's visually great. But this movie is not going to work for everyone. And it did not work for me the first time I watched it.
Yeah, I want to emphasise we are bigging up Only God Forgives, but if you don't like this movie, I cannot
No.
blame you for not
No.
liking this movie. It's, for all intents and purposes, boring. It's a boring movie if you're not into slow burn.
I think my reaction was so shocking because of how viscerally I felt the first time I watched it. And I think maybe my tastes have changed, but this movie is not for everyone. And I actually think that having watched The Neon Demon, I personally, and I know you'll disagree, think that this is more accessible than that.
They sort of exist in the same...
I mean, they're both
realm.
very weird. I would probably recommend Only God Forgives for people to watch over The Neon Demon because I know there's barely any dialogue and some people will find it really boring. However, The Neon Demon is a mind fuck. That movie is like unhinged.
I think this movie is more unhinged than The Neon Demon.
Yeah, I guess it's personal opinion.
You want to fight?
Most of the themes of Only God Forgives are purgatory. That is what it's
Yeah.
about. Basically, the film came about because Nick Refn's wife was heavily pregnant with their second child. They were having complications, and Refn basically wanted to say "fuck you" to God.
Right.
That's his explanation of this movie. It's trying to get revenge on God.
And I had this idea to make a movie about a man who believes he's God versus a man who's searching for a fight.
So Chang is like the God of the Old Testament, where he exacts revenge on those who do wrong. He takes hands as a sort of castration.
There's so much hand imagery in this movie. There's so many shots of Ryan Gosling's hands. And even the scene where he's asking his girlfriend / sex worker to sort of like masturbate in front of him. His hands are like immobilized. I'm guessing, you don't know, but I'm guessing it's at his request because he's a bit of a sex freak.
I think it's about his sexual inadequacies as well.
Yeah, because the mum mentions that Billy, the brother, had like a bigger dick, which tells you everything that you need to know about this movie. This guy has mommy issues.
Well, with Billy being the older brother and having a bigger cock, Julian's was never small, but Billy's was, oh, it was enormous.
It's so hard to explain this movie to someone who hasn't seen it, because I don't want to spoil the whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's set predominantly in a Muay Thai boxing club. And upstairs is where Ryan Gosling spends most of his time. So in Ryan Gosling's room, and it's all very inky and red, saturated.
The colours in this are beautiful.
It's an amazingly shot movie. Ryan Gosling's having a lot of visions of Chang before he's even met Chang. Do you remember in that sex scene, he is having visions of Chang
Coming out to
through.
the door,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
That whole room is meant to be a mix between purgatory and the inside of Julian's mind.
Yeah.
Because it's occupied by pretty much Chang, his mother, and his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And his mother and his girlfriend sort of appear in the same places on Julian's bed most of the time.
He's sort of framed in the beginning, I wouldn't say as a hero, but up until that point, and I'm sure you know which point I mean, you get the sense that he loves his partner. And it's not until the scene where they leave the dinner, he says, I want to take you out for dinner to meet my mum. Which obviously, going into it, it goes absolutely horribly. This woman is evil.
His mother was apparently based on Donatella Versace.
Really?
It's a mix between Lady Macbeth and Donatella Versace.
That is so odd.
All the costumes were inspired by Versace.
That is so funny. Love it. And it basically goes horribly. The mum starts berating this girl to her face. And then sort of says, oh, I'm so sorry, it's because my son's died. I'm not really. But you know that she meant every single word that she says.
Do you remember what she describes the date as?
No.
Do you remember the phrase she uses?
No.
Cum dumpster.
Oh, yes.
I'm an entertainer.
An entertainer. And how many cocks can you entertain with that cute little cum dumpster of yours?
Which was Ryan's idea. Because Nicholas Winding Refn was like, English is his second language. He's like, I don't know a slang term. And apparently Ryan Gosling was like, yeah, just call her a cum dumpster. And Kristen Scott Thomas apparently had to do the take about 50 times because she couldn't get through that phrase.
It is horrible.
Yeah.
The way she says it as well.
Yeah.
And the girl is just like...
She's gorgeous as well.
Yeah. It's the most out-of-pocket, rude...
Yeah.
Awful, awful, awful thing you could possibly ever say to someone, and she just sits there and is like, "Did I just did that just happen?" And Ryan Gosling's face,
Yeah.
he has no emotion on his face,
No.
not a single expression.
He just sits there and takes it.
Yeah, and it's like, I'm not surprised she calls him out because it's like, you look pathetic. Your mother is awful. So they leave the place. He screams at her.
Take it off!
Well, again, he is a mummy's boy. This actress is fucking amazing as well. Because she has
The girlfriend.
Yeah, she has 2 lines of
Amazing.
dialogue in this movie.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Wow. You get everything you need to know about her.
She's so good. She was a teenage pop star who burnt out, basically. This was a movie trying to reinvent herself as an actress.
That's crazy. Where is she from? Do you know?
I think she's Thai.
She's Thai.
Yeah. Of this dinner with his mother, the girlfriend says, like, why'd you let her speak to you like that?
Yeah.
And he goes, because she's my mother. And then he just loses the plot from there.
She is pure evil. Her family allegiance is, well, she's incestuous, whether or not physically incestuous or not.
See, it's so disturbing. Some of the interactions her and Julian have are just make you sick to your stomach.
It sort of reminded me of like a Norman Bates type thing. It's quite an old archetype of the overbearing mother and the devoted but emotionally stunted son.
Oh, there's Mother now. Watching me. What's that, Mother? Well, they have a right to be here. It's school business.
You know, the theme of the brother as well. His inadequacy is not only reflected sort of himself, but his mother puts that on him as well.
Oh, yeah, no, he is. Billy was the golden child.
Yeah.
She doesn't respect Julian at all because, as we said in the plot summary, so his brother is killed by the father of a girl he raped and killed. And then Julian does manage to track down the father who killed Billy, but ends up letting him go.
Well, he finds out that Billy raped and murdered a kid.
Yes, and that scene as well has no dialogue. They find him and they track him into like a shed,
Yes.
and it's Julian,
And then two,
Charlie,
like, yeah.
and the other guy. And apparently they had it scripted. The guy spoke, and it was supposed to be subtitled, the father, saying like, "Oh, he raped and killed a 16-year-old." And Refn was like, "It was the worst piece of dialogue I've ever written." And he was like, "It was so bad, it was near unusable, so I just put music over it and muted it." And I think because it tracks into Julian's face, and just Gosling's face acting is just amazing. He barely blinks in this movie.
He is so good in this movie. And we'll get into his friendship with Nick Refn. It's odd, and it's very endearing on both sides.
I didn't realise that Ryan Gosling contacted Refn. I would imagine it was the other way around,
You
but
would
apparently
think
not.
so.
And they're like best friends, I think. But Refn is a madman. He is nuts.
He's a weird guy.
He is clinically insane, I think.
Yeah.
Refn always has imagery or feeling before he has plot.
Mm. No.
And this entire film is based on the imagery of a closed fist.
Arthur.
Yeah. It's all about violence and vengeance and using your body as a weapon.
I mean, as I've said, there are so, and this cannot be overstated, there are so many shots of hands in this movie. Extreme close-ups of, I mean, Ryan Gosling has nice hands.
Only God Forgives, for example, it all began with a man who would be looking at hands like this and go like that. That was how the whole film was conceived.
And Gosling's arc in the movie is entirely based on his hand. At certain points when he's with his mother, there's a sense of submission. And apparently he's always open-palmed, which is submission. And then when he's defensive, he closes up.
Right.
Things like that, where he tells a story through hands. It's very bizarre, man. This movie's fucked up and weird.
I've just realised we're really going to struggle to cut clips in from this movie because there's barely any audio.
You know, there's not a lot.
Cum dumpster.
It's a very much a departure away from Drive in the sense of Drive splits very successfully plot and aesthetics. And I think this movie, as long as you're along for the ride, you don't really give a shit about the plot. It has enough of a framework. Valhalla Rising we watched this week, and I didn't like that. I felt there was nothing to latch onto. This gave you, for me personally, enough information that you knew what the plot was and you knew the direction that the plot was going in. And for me, that's enough. I can absolutely understand if you feel this movie has no plot and has nothing to tell you. I don't agree, but we've said any criticism of this movie, I can't sit here and say, no, you're wrong, because you're right.
So it's interesting you bring up Valhalla Rising as well, because Chang, the police lieutenant in this movie, is a character we've seen in Refn's work before. Refn describes One Eye from Valhalla Rising, which is Mads' character,
Yeah.
the driver from Drive, and Chang. Apparently, in Refn's mind, they're all the same characters played by 3 different actors.
They serve the same plot.
They serve the same plot point, which is enacting justice on the unjust.
Okay.
It's a godlike figure
That makes
of
sense.
judgment and of punishment for sin.
Judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah, exactly. It's very Old Testament, and none of them have many lines of dialogue in either of those movies.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mads, does he even have
I don't think he has a single line of dialogue in
Valhalla Rising?
Valhalla. And Chang barely speaks, he just sings in this movie a lot.
I love the karaoke in this movie is used so well.
It's very Lynchian. It reminds me of Blue Velvet a lot, this movie.
A candy-colored clown they call the Sandman tiptoes to my room every night.
You said to me while watching, I think if Blue Velvet was a bit more modern and was a bit less hokey, I probably would like it, and I think so. When we sort of talk about Poor Things, and I said, I liked it, but it just, for whatever reason, it didn't click with me. This movie clicked, and I felt everything you've ever said about this movie. I'm like, yeah, I get it now. And I was so taken aback by that. I had the best time watching this. It's an hour and a half. It doesn't overstay its welcome any longer, and I think it would have been too much.
It's just so rewatchable.
It's like an art piece, I think, more than anything, and it's a cinematic experience in a way where the visuals are the important thing. And there's themes, but you aren't going to get that the first time you watch the movie.
He deals drugs, May. Heroin, cocaine. That's where the money comes from. That's how he can afford to pay you to fuck him.
In terms of production design, they didn't really build sets to this at all.
Right.
This was all found location in
That
Bangkok.
doesn't surprise me.
The only thing was the tiger in the hall
Yeah, I remember that.
was a prop. But the
Okay.
rest of it, all of the upstairs, all of Ryan Gosling's upstairs of the Muay Thai was a boxing club, and that's where the fighters slept.
Oh, really?
All the karaoke scenes were shot in gay clubs, in Chinatown.
Does the movie end with the extended scene of Chang singing karaoke?
Yeah,
Beautiful scene.
Oh, yeah.
Loved it.
because he's dressed in clothes that are designed for retired Thai police officers.
Right.
He's not retired, but Refn liked the uniform so much because he reminded him of a priest,
Okay.
like a vicar, the old school collars and stuff. And yeah, apparently according to Refn, the karaoke scene's supposed to be his sort of church sermon, because all the police officers had sat there intently watching Chang.
It's very uncanny, isn't it? The laser focus that is on him. He's just singing karaoke, but it's almost like a sermon.
Lots of tunnels and corridors in this movie. Pretty much, if you rewatch it, with that in mind, near on every scene is set in a hallway, a corridor, or a tunnel. Very vaginal.
Yes.
This premiered at Cannes. It got equal parts booed and equal parts standing ovation, which I think sums up the movie completely. It's you either love it or you hate it.
Looking at the critic scores, I'm like, you know what? I can't disagree. If you fucking hated this movie, I'm like, fair enough.
But there's a story of a critic coming up to him at Cannes and being like, "Oh, I think I get it. The entire movie's set in a vagina, right?" And Refn was like, yeah, sure.
Why not?
Why not?" Pretty much is. If you're tracking the theme,
Yeah.
it pretty much is set inside a vagina. And obviously, at the end, spoiler alert for Only God Forgives, go watch it or just skip like 10 seconds after I say this.
Cum dumpster.
When he re-enters his mother at the end, was Ryan Gosling's idea, which is, I think, a perfect ending. He's re-entering the womb.
The lights sort of have a haziness and the colours are so bright. I mean, we haven't mentioned Nick Refn is colourblind.
And he loves to tell people that.
Yeah, obviously, such a pick-me thing. But it sort of feels like, you know, when you see footage of a womb
Yes.
with a baby in it and it's like sort of hazy and there's like a film almost over it. That's how it feels, the way everything is shot. It just sort of has that.
It's very inky.
It's very comforting. There's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
quite.
But uncanny.
Yeah, 100%. I think the parts that didn't really work for me was when you see Julian sort of living his normal life in Bangkok. It literally is probably one scene that it happens in.
I'm trying to remember what scene.
I think it's before he goes to the shed, and it's sort of the contrast between the colour of the scene. It's very beige and like.
I know exactly the scene you're talking about because it's
He
framed.
has a dog, right?
That's not his normal life. That is him tracking down
Okay,
the father.
right.
And it's one of the only scenes set in daylight as well.
It's so jarring in comparison to everything else in the movie.
It's frustrating. I do wish, because the end of the movie is also daylight, Julian's judgment, I guess you could call it.
Yeah.
And I wish that was the only scene that was set in daylight.
Yeah, when I said sort of the normal life, I mean almost the normal life of Bangkok, where it's like outside of this like seedy underbelly of like organised crime, and that is the only scene that we ever see that's set outside of that.
It's funny you say that as well, because obviously Refn lived in Bangkok for a bit while filming this, and the whole idea of the movie, Bangkok is a weird city where it feels very Western up until about midnight, 1 a.m. apparently.
Right.
And then when the tourists go back to their hotels, some people who live in Bangkok live entirely by night,
Yeah.
which I think is awesome, and it is displayed very well in this movie.
Yeah.
Where it feels much more like an Asian city post midnight apparently.
That tracks. I mean, the shots that are set in the day, they're very tranquil, and you just sort of see Julian standing around and he looks so out of place. And I mean, every Nick Refn movie is incredibly stylish, but his outfits in this is so... He's so cool.
Because she's my mother. Now, if you don't want that dress, take it off.
So one last point I'll say, which is very interesting and goes into production with Only God Forgives, is that every exterior scene was shot guerrilla. They didn't have permits.
Do you have to have permits in Bangkok?
Legally, yes. They had to pay off cops.
Oh.
Because where they were shooting in Chinatown apparently was a lot of gang activity. So they basically paid the cops off for protection. They paid the cops $90,000
Right.
for protection for shooting. Apparently a film festival gave them $90K for Ryan and Nick to show up at a film festival in Bangkok. Paid the $90K and they never showed up. Yeah, well, he doesn't seem to be that arsed about it. I was like, that's pretty shitty. But he was like, yeah, no, he didn't show up. It's a weird movie. I recommend watching it to...
Question mark?
If you like Lynch movies, not even if you like martial arts movies, there's no martial art movie. There's one scene, the wanna fight scene, which again is one of the iconic scenes.
But it's not even particularly not well choreographed, but
it's very real. It's not glamorous.
Yeah, it's not exciting.
No.
It's
Julian just gets his
see a
arse
man
handed
beat
to
down.
him. Yeah.
The only other bit I didn't really like, and I'm sort of remembering because this is basically my first time watching it. The green set in like the epilogue. There's like two hitmen.
Yeah, so two hitmen go, including I think it's Julian and Charlie, go to Chang's house at the Order of Crystal to kill Chang.
Yeah.
And the hitman kills the babysitter and then goes to kill Chang's daughter. But Julian then kills Charlie.
Yeah.
Because Julian was originally meant to kill the daughter.
Right.
But they felt that there was no redemption arc. And if you do that, something as grotesque as that, no one is going to be on Julian's side. Whereas at the end of the movie, you are sort of on Julian's side. You learn some things along the way, which I'm not going to spoil. But Julian is an anti-hero.
Yeah, I think it's crazy how that one scene where he yells at his girlfriend for me, he was teetering on the edge, right? And that one scene was like, oh my goodness, there is something severely wrong with this man.
Never come between a man and his mother.
Well, exactly. And
Wants to
mummy
re-enter
issues
the
scare
womb.
me.
Yeah. And this
They're
is very
so threatening.
scary. I think you should rewatch this movie with a couple of things in mind.
I agree.
If you're going to watch this, do you remember, I have a couple copies of David Lynch's Mulholland Drive, and in there is little post-it notes with questions. I feel like this movie needs that.
I agree.
What is the significance of Julian's abode?
This is sort of like...
Who sits on Julian's bed? These things where it's like, it's so key to understanding the movie.
Yeah. You need a little bit of hand-holding to get the most out of this movie. I enjoyed it visually, but I would really like to go back and rewatch it knowing all of the themes and the motifs to express the plot and the themes, and I think I would like it even more.
I watched this yesterday, a couple of days ago, because we watched it, and then the following day I watched it with the audio commentary by myself, and I would recommend, if you're into this movie, trying to find, I have the Blu-ray, but trying to find the audio commentary.
Getting a little bit of insight into Nick's crazy, crazy mind.
Yeah, it's needed. Watch all the behind the scenes. It's
is
so funny.
mental.
He is a very funny man. Just look up Nicholas Winding Refn directs, and you'll see the outfit he insists
Blanky.
on wearing every time they shoot, which is a white shirt, shorts, like cargo shorts, and a blanket wrapped around his waist because he thinks it keeps in his energy. That's all you need to know.
He's a crystal girly.
I have a ritual on all films, which is I go and I get a blanket and I wrap it around my stomach. It's there to keep the energy within me, and it calms me down.
Shall we move on to The Neon Demon?
I think we should.
Go watch Only God Forgives. It fucking rocks.
Rules, bro.
Cum dumpster.
So that concludes our discussion of Only God Forgives. A little bit of a hard one to discuss. There's not particularly any structure that comes with that movie. It's a bit, you go on vibes.
And watch it for the vibes.
Yeah, if you get the vibes, you'll love it. So The Neon Demon came out in 2016, so 3 years after Only God Forgives. It was distributed by Amazon Studios, a longer runtime of 1 hour and 57 minutes. It had a production budget of $7.5 million. Currently sits at a 6.1 on IMDb, a 59% on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 51 Metascore.
So it was received better than God Forgives.
However, This movie made a worldwide box office revenue of $3.5 million
Owie.
against a $7.5 million budget. It grossed 44.2% of its whole revenue on opening weekend. And it's because Nicholas tricked people into going to see this creepy sex pervert movie.
Based.
But I just try to kind of close my eyes and then I try to figure out what would I like to see today. It's a bit like fetishizing. It's like playing with dolls and you're like, what would I like her to wear? You creep.
We've talked about him being a creepy sex pervert in the last movie to a much lesser extent. This movie is fucking weird.
It is a bizarre flick.
So we will talk about how I firmly believe Nicholas tricked people into going to see this creepo, weird-ass movie. So just to give you a little overview of the plot, Jessie, played by Dakota Fanning.
Elle Fanning.
Jessie, played by Elle Fanning, is a 16-year-old aspiring model from a small town, and she arrives in Los Angeles with dreams of becoming a successful model.
I see 20 or 30 girls come in here every day, mostly from small towns with big dreams. And they're all good. You're going to be great.
She quickly catches the attention of photographers, designers, and other models with her natural beauty and innocence. However, this opens her up to be an easy target for manipulation and exploitation. Jessie befriends fellow models Sarah and Gigi, as well as a makeup artist who is played by Jenna Malone.
I'm Ruby, by the way. Do you have a name, or you want me to guess?
They are initially sort of friendly with her, but as her career begins to skyrocket, this soon gives way to jealousy and rivalry. As her career flourishes, Jessie becomes increasingly immersed in the superficial and cutthroat world of high fashion. She attracts the attention of many different individuals in the industry who have huge influence, and her rapid rise to fame begins to fuel a lot of resentment and hostility between her and her peers, especially Sarah and Gigi, who feel threatened by her success and age. As Jessie delves deeper into the glamorous and sinister world of modelling, she begins to experience hallucinations and nightmares, and her relationship with those around her become increasingly strained. The tension between Jessie and her rivals reaches a climax during a photo shoot, where Sarah and Gigi's envy turns into violence.
Ooh. So many white women.
Any runway experience?
Not really.
So, in 2013, Nick Refn announced his new films after Only God Forgives would be a Miami or Tokyo set all-female horror with quote-unquote lots of sex called I Walk with the Dead.
Yeah, I did read about A Walk with the Dead. It's a shame it never happened. It sounds awesome.
Carey Mulligan was meant to be in the lead. She was also meant to be in the lead in this movie. However, had to drop out due to scheduling conflicts, and the role then went to Elle Fanning.
In terms of casting, I felt I could either cast an unknown or it was going to be Elle Fanning.
Liar!
In November 2014, Refn basically decided he was going to scrap all that and announced the film would be called The Neon Demon. He stated that the script was based on Elizabeth Bathory. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She was a Hungarian noblewoman born in 1560 in what is now modern-day Slovakia, famous for being one of the most prolific female serial killers in all of history. The number of victims is sort of debated, but it's believed that she tortured and murdered hundreds of young, primarily peasant girls during the early 17th, late 16th century. And you may have sort of heard this. Legend states that she believed that bathing in the blood of virgins would maintain her beauty and youth.
That's what the Clintons do. I read that on Twitter.
Did you?
Yeah. Hillary Clinton does that.
It reminded me of that bit in Hostel 2.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
You may not necessarily recognise that name. However, she was the basis for the Countess in American Horror Story Hotel, Lady Gaga's character.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. Because she's a bitch with no conscience, no mercy, no soul.
Oh, Liz.
Ignore her. She drinks.
And she is also indirectly depicted in the season 4 episode of Supernatural, Sex and Violence.
Woo!
Big up
What was that
SPM,
episode?
Sex and Violence. There's a siren, and she takes sort of many forms. One of those is Elizabeth.
Oh.
So Nick's quote for this: I woke up one morning a couple of years ago and was like, well, I was never born beautiful, but my wife is. And I wondered what it had been like
Press
going
X
through
to doubt.
and I wondered what it had been like going through life with that reality. I came up with the idea to do a horror film about beauty, not to criticize or attack it, but because beauty is a very complex subject. Everyone has an opinion about it. I decided that I'd made enough films about violent men, and I wanted to do a film with only women.
This is obviously the first time he hasn't used a male muse.
We had Mads, we had Ryan.
We had Tom Hardy. Griffin admits to having weird homoerotic relationships with his lead actors. He fancies them all, basically.
Cillian Murphy and Chris Nolan spring to mind.
Yes.
I love it. I love a little boy who geeks out about a beautiful man with pretty eyes. Composer Cliff Martinez, who worked alongside Nick on Drive, said that the films have similar styles, musically speaking. For this movie, he saw a quote-unquote sparse electronic score. He stated that the first half of the film resembles a melodrama like Valley of the Dolls, and the second half is like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Is it, though?
Yes.
And it wasn't until I was 14 when I saw the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in New York that film found me, because it wasn't that I wanted to be a director or writer or producer. I wanted to do what that film did.
And having done the research prior to watching this movie again, I noticed it. But watching it with that in mind, again, as we said earlier, it's an adult fairy tale. And some of the music in this is beautiful.
I will just say straight up, I enjoyed it much more than my first watch this one. I do really like this movie. I think it's great.
I really like it. It is an exploitation movie.
But yeah, it's like a weird 70s fucking movie.
And how young Jesse's character is makes for quite an uncomfortable watch.
It holds on to its European sensibilities, although it is set in LA.
Yeah.
You can tell a European man directed this.
Well, Carey Mulligan was originally meant to play the role, and I think had that happened, it probably wouldn't have been quite as... But Elle Fanning was 16 when this movie started principal photography.
She looks like an actual child.
Yeah, she looks very, very young in this movie. And she is very young in this movie. And I think that informs a lot of the plot and what we'll sort of go on to talk about. Exactly as with Only God Forgives, the reaction for this movie was extremely polarizing. Better sort of received critically than Only God Forgives. However, it was met with boos and standing ovation at Cannes. As I said, this cannot be emphasized enough. This movie is an exploitation movie. There is some pretty fucking shocking stuff in this.
Yeah, it's not for the
faint of heart
or the delicate of stomach.
Watching this, I was so envious that I ever saw this in the cinema.
Can't believe you saw this in the cinema.
It makes me
so
angry
annoying.
because the visuals in this movie, but also I'm so embarrassed that I thought that this would be a good film to take my friends to see.
Girls' night.
Girls' night, and it's just the most batshit insane stuff you've ever seen in a major motion picture.
You know, I didn't know that you'd feel that way about this movie. I don't know much about movies, but if I...
Is the only kind of movies you go to?
Well, yeah, I mean, I come and this is not so bad.
It's funny, you and your friends probably comprised of 50% of the box office take on this
Well,
movie.
This movie lost money.
Yeah.
It didn't even make half of its budget back. People hated this.
Yeah, it's not one for mainstream audiences.
It really
It would
isn't.
never get a cinematic release. Even 10 years down the line now, this would never end up in cinemas.
If you told me you found this movie morally reprehensible, again, I don't really think that I could disagree with you. It's a nasty, grimy little movie.
It 100% is, and that is the best way to describe it. It's grim.
Keanu Reeves being cast as an evil man is a very, very odd choice.
I know where the bastard sleeps.
I will say the casting is really fucking weird in this movie. That is, it's my main problem with the movie is the acting.
You spoke earlier about how they muted a scene in Only God Forgives because Nick claimed that the dialogue was so bad it couldn't even be put to screen. Wish he'd done the same with this movie.
Don't get me wrong. There's a scene with Christina Hendricks which is dialogue heavy, and she eats. She leaves no crumbs. I think she's great.
As she always does.
Jenna Malone, right? I'm Gretchen Ross Pilled.
Yeah.
I'm Donnie Darko Core.
You're weird.
Sorry.
Yeah, that was a compliment.
I love that movie, and I love Gretchen Ross. She was my biggest crush when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
She fucking stinks in this movie.
I don't agree at all.
She fucking sucks.
I liked her.
Oh, she can't act. She always has that wry smile, and I get it. And it's a very one-note performance, though.
I don't agree. I think how far she is pushed by this character is mental. I'm going to drop the bomb in here.
Drop some K knowledge on me.
I don't want anyone to go and watch this movie without knowing that this scene is included in the movie, because I've seen a lot of shit and this turns my stomach. So she's a makeup artist, right? And from the beginning, you sort of get the impression that she's a bit odd.
Yeah.
She's very lecherous towards Jesse.
Very predatory.
Yeah, as is every single person who encounters Jesse in this movie.
Am I staring? A little. Sorry. Just have such beautiful skin.
Don't know if it's ever stated that she's a lesbian, but
She gives lesbian vibes.
she gives lesbian vibes, and she also works as a mortician.
Oh yeah, I completely forgot about that.
She's one of those odd people who are just a bit too obsessed with like death and the crossover between having a morbid curiosity and fascination about death and also being an absolute freak.
It's a very archetypal character, isn't it?
She basically tries to kiss Jessie, and Jessie sort of rebuffs her. She states she's a virgin, and she still continues to assault her. Jessie sort of pushes her off the bed aggressively. Cut to the next scene. She begins going to town on a corpse.
Yeah.
There's no way around describing this. It is absolutely horrifying, and in all good conscience, I don't think I can recommend this movie without being like, if you're okay with seeing that, you might like this movie.
If you're a freak, you're gonna like this movie.
Yeah, if you thought Only God Forgives was a sex pervert movie, this is...
Yeah, this is a real fucking pervert movie.
However, I think it works for the plot, and I think that the awful and scary and nightmarish hellscape that the modelling industry is portrayed as, I think it really works narratively.
True beauty is the highest currency we have. Without it, she would be nothing.
You didn't think Jenna Malone's performance was good. I actually thought she was great. Abby Lee is one of the models in this movie.
She's not very good either.
She is obviously a model.
Yeah.
And basically served as a consultant on this movie to ensure that all of the modelling shoots and castings were accurate. And I think that goes a long way in sort of making this movie not only work thematically, but feel grounded in reality.
No, I 100% agree with you there. In the same way that, I guess, Eyes Wide Shut and those movies, it does feel like you're taking a peek behind the curtain a little bit.
And it's very LA.
It is very LA, and it's just...
It's grimy, it's seedy.
It feels like an expose.
Yes, it does. If Nick Refn was murdered after making this movie, I wouldn't have been surprised.
But it's so sleazy, and it just feels like a sweaty movie, doesn't it? It's very saturated.
It is, but it's also camp.
I don't get any camp out of
Do
this
you not?
movie. No.
I think the catty girl dialogue and the model...
But it's all set to, like, a constant electronic drone that I just can't... It just puts me on edge. I just feel edgy.
All of the model dialogue is very funny. Did you not get that?
Yeah, no, it is, and it's dry. And
It's very dry. I personally...
But I wouldn't say it's camp.
The catty girl dialogue I found very funny.
I guess, yeah, like you said, if you take into account that...
Nick Refn wrote this movie.
A weird autistic Danish man wrote this. It is, yeah, I guess I can see where you're coming from.
They say women are more likely to buy a lipstick if it's named after food or sex. Just think about it.
Gigi and Sarah, they're so jealous of this girl. And it's really made a point of that Jessie is so naturally beautiful. She's not had surgery, and people look to her as this like deity. She's naturally beautiful and she's so young. Obviously, Christina Hendricks' character tells her to lie about her age and say that she's 19. Knowing that she's 16 obviously informs the creepy way that she is treated by all these people. You can say that most people think she's 19. However, everyone knows the industry, and I think...
It's so obvious that she's not 19.
No.
Even she goes, who's going to believe that?
Yeah.
I think it is set up to, although she said that, I do think that we're meant to believe that people don't believe it.
Yeah, and I also think that it shows this industry is inherently corrupt. This industry feeds off the exploitation of minors.
It's inherently paedophilic.
Yeah. And they don't go too far with it, but in the scene where she's in her first sort of professional high-end shoot, everyone is asked to leave the room and have a closed set. Jenna Malone's character tries to sort of stay and protect her because she knows what this photographer is like. He basically asks her to strip and then strip naked, and then begins to, with his hands, put gold paint on her.
I think it is implied she's raped in that scene, right?
I don't think they ever go that far with it.
I thought it was implied, the way she comes out of that shoot.
I think the point is that he is applying this paint with his hands and touching her body, and the lights are all shut off, and then he begins like taking photos of her. To me, it read as they're being exploited in the name of art, in the sense of, yes, you have to do this to her to get the shot. You don't have to rub her with your own hands.
You don't have to send everyone off set. So he says, we're going to have a closed set today. And it's like, oh, fucking hell, mate.
Take off your clothes. Is there a problem? All of it.
Yeah, and it's so... You don't know exactly what happened. You see enough where I think you get the message, but it's not done to a point of being... It's uncomfortable, but thankfully you don't sort of see anything else. And everything is portrayed as being so scary. And you get the sense that this girl is in a world which she is not ready for.
She is in over her head.
Yeah, and there's so many. She's in the seedy motel, which Keanu Reeves owns, and everything is so threatening. She's constantly threatened by everyone around her.
Including a mountain lion.
Yeah, mountain lion. Just giving Teen Wolf. She has no family, she has no friends, and the people around her know that. Because so many times it's said she doesn't have anyone.
Can you just get to LA, Jessie? How'd you know? You've got that look. Oh, don't worry, honey. That whole deer in the headlights thing is exactly what they want.
Ruby, who's Jenna Malone's character, initially poises herself as a friend and someone who wants to help her. And then you just sort of find out the only thing she's really interested in is sort of sleeping with her.
But it's the exact same as her boyfriend, who learns that she's 16 and sort of makes a gag. And I thought like, oh, thank God, because he was like, oh, I'm going to go now. But then at the end of the day, he still tries to kiss her. And it's like, fuck's sake, you're just as bad as the rest of them.
Everyone around her is just prepared to exploit her. And it's interesting you mentioned Eyes Wide Shut earlier because it feels like a conspiracy.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%.
It feels like everyone around her is trying to use her for something.
And everyone's in on something that she's not.
Yeah,
Everyone
exactly.
knows something that she doesn't.
And visually, that's explored so well, especially in the sets where she's on shoot. I mean, this movie looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's one of the best looking movies I've ever seen.
And I think that it was such a smart move from Nick to choose this as a setting because the visuals that he gets out of this backdrop of high fashion shooting is incredible. There's one scene in particular that I'm thinking of where it may be the gold scene, I can't remember, but she's stood against this sort of white backdrop.
That is, for me, the lingering image of this movie, because she's so far away.
She's so diminutive in this massive white expanse.
Yeah, the frame is just 99% white.
And you can see how small she is in this world. But at the same time, everyone is so jealous of her and they're so envious because Sarah's character and Gigi, who are the two models, Gigi openly admits to having lots of work done. She sort of says that it's like getting your teeth clean. It's just par for the course at this point. But everyone in the industry is so in awe of Jessie because she's natural.
And it is that sort of, whether it's age or virginity or purity, everyone is very envious of whatever this thing is that she has, which is hard to pinpoint, which I guess, if you're going by the themes of the movie, is virginity.
Yeah, and also it plays a lot on the concept of mimetic desire, which is basically, it's a sociological concept that the only reason we want things is because other people desire them. And I think that is reflected so well in this movie, of the sense of, because she's popular and because everyone else wants her, everyone around her sort of is like, I either don't like that or I'm going to co-opt that. And I think, like you said, virginity, it plays on the theme of age as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because Sarah and Gigi are considerably older than... How old would you say they are?
I think 20s.
They're constantly reflected as being washed up, and they're not old by any circumstances, and they're both stunningly beautiful. But it's a young person's game.
And they don't have the purity that she
No.
has. Or the innocence, which they have nothing left to exploit. They've given everything up to the industry, and Jessie still has everything to give.
And they constantly talk about, okay, so who did you fuck to get here? It's constantly brought up against her, and Jessie's like, I don't know what you mean. Like,
Yeah, because there's a scene where Ruby says something like, everyone here wants to know who you're fucking.
yeah, and she sort of lies and passes it off as if she's had boyfriends in the past.
All she really wants to know is, who are you fucking?
Sorry?
What? Isn't that what everyone wants to know?
I'd like to just say Elle Fanning is fucking amazing in this movie.
Yeah.
She's really fucking good.
Because you said during the screening, when she first came on screen, I was like...
I thought she was a complete miscast, but by the end of the movie, she exemplifies everything that character is meant to be. She does it very well. Again, probably, I think Nick Refn directs actors very well.
Yeah, I agree. The dialogue may not be that strong, but there was only a few scenes to me where it stood out. I think it bothered you more than it did me. There's so many, like, striking visual moments in this film. Like, the scene where they go to that underground party and it's like almost an art exhibition. That was actually played by one of the crew members. This person sort of in bondage who's raised in the ceiling, and it's like all black. Don't watch this movie if you're photosensitive.
Yeah, there is it's very Gaspar Noé.
We both said that we would like to cover Climax at some point, but
And Enter the Void.
but it feels very indebted to that style of...
It's a European film, isn't it?
Exactly.
Well, like you, I shoot in chronologically order, you know. So
Just for Irreversible, but not for...
not fun to watch.
No.
Oh wow. Well, I mean, I shoot in chronologically order because else I get confused.
Segueing from the visuals, I think another really, really important aspect to talk about, and probably my favourite part of the movie, is the costume design.
Mm-hmm.
This is like pornography for me. There's a very, very funny scene. Well, it's not a scene in the movie, but something that we laughed very hard at is in the credits. Nick,
Oh, yeah. He's such a wanker, man. He's so...
Nick lists an extremely long list of all of his thanks.
Including Vaseline is one of them.
Q-tips.
Q-tips and Vaseline. Also, speaking of weird credits, I'll just quickly go back to Only God Forgives. And the film is dedicated to Jodorowsky. And apparently Nick Refn thinks he's best friends with Jodorowsky. He thinks a lot about himself. He thinks very highly of himself.
Well, this movie was dedicated to his wife.
Yeah, Liv, right?
Yeah, and he does that little heart symbol, which made me laugh.
Yeah, I love him.
Credited in that thanks section is Schiaparelli. There was a lot, I can't remember sort of any of them.
I remember Topshop.
Yeah, and I wonder, the Topshop bit, I'm 99% sure that... You remember the first time she gets photographed and she's got all those like gems on her face?
Yeah.
I'm 99% sure that that is Topshop makeup, because it feels very juvenile in the sense of you very quickly see her progression in the industry. So when she takes her headshots to Christina Hendricks, she sort of says the shots are very juvenile and they feel a bit rudimentary, and sort of as she progresses up the ladder into going to more sort of high fashion castings, she looks more like a model. She's wearing better outfits. At the beginning, she's got ringlety hair and she looks like a small town country bumpkin. And then sort of by the time she's spent what feels like 2 days, feels very instantaneous, and I think it's sort of meant to replicate how quickly you get caught up in the world of fashion. And I think it's done to the nth degree, sort of shows how quickly she gets wrapped up in this world. It's never explicitly stated when, but at some point in the film, she becomes the aliens that are around her. She has the highest opinion of herself. She goes from being deer in the headlights to the person driving the car.
Yeah.
You know what my mother used to call me? Dangerous.
Her mindset quickly switches and she's like, these other bitches bow down to me. And she becomes part of that cog.
And to her own downfall.
Yeah, and that's when everyone around her's like, well, fuck you. She starts speaking in a way that sounds like nothing we've heard her speak before. She starts speaking in this sort of odd, detached... She's almost become the Neon Demon.
Maybe the Neon Demon was the friends we made along the way.
Exactly. We were talking about the costume design, and you sort of see her progression in her outfits, much how when we spoke about Poor Things, it's costuming plot. And it's funny that they reference Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the soundtrack, because there's a lot of Frankensteinian outfits. I'm thinking of the one scene where Gigi and Sarah, they're in that shoot which is like out over the expanse of LA.
And they've got like braids in their hair, right?
Weird cultural appropriating like cornrows, and they're also wearing these odd like breastplates, and they've got stitching down the side of them, and it feels very much like Leatherface stitching his human skin together.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, and in the clothes, you see a lot of weird Frankensteinian references where she is almost like a Frankenstein's monster. She's been molded into this image of perfection, and she sort of goes so far. People keep telling her that she is, you know, she's going to become the next superstar, and she sort of, on a dime, just switches and is like, yeah, I'm as good as everyone says I am.
And you can't really blame her.
No.
Because she's been groomed into thinking this.
She has been groomed by everyone around her. She is raped by Ruby, and also really fucking pissed me off. Saw a YouTube video the other day talking about the sex scene in the movie. There's no sex scenes in this movie.
No.
The only sex scenes are rape.
Or necrophilia.
So they asked Elle Fanning a question about how she felt filming the female sex scenes of this movie. You can see how visibly uncomfortable she looks by the question, because it's clearly someone who completely misunderstood what that scene was.
I love all the sex scenes in Gaspar Noé's Irreversible. They're great.
Non-consensual sex is not a thing, guys. It doesn't exist. So that pissed me off.
Women would kill to look like this.
What did you actually, having the end of this sort of discussion, did you...
About Neon Demon?
Yeah.
I really like Neon Demon.
It's not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination.
I think it is missing a final pass on the script, and I think it needs a bit of tightening in editing.
So what do you think? We haven't really talked about the ending of the movie.
Yes.
Which is, after the necrophilia scene, you sort of think, well, this can't get any more crazy. The movie basically ends, spoiler alert, if you don't want the movie to be spoiled, skip through this part. The ending of the movie is Gigi, Ruby, and Sarah conspire to kill Jessie. They chase her around the house with knives, and she falls and ends up cracking her head open, and she's sort of twitching on the floor, and that's probably about 10 minutes from the end. So the epilogue of the film focuses on Sarah and Gigi.
And Ruby.
In the aftermath, we see a scene of Ruby lying in the ground with what we can imagine is Jessie's corpse.
Isn't she bathing in her blood at one point?
Yeah, and Gigi and Sarah decide to cannibalize Jessie so that they can gain her beauty and become like Jessie. So that's where the Hungarian countess stuff comes in.
I do like it, and I think the ending's shocking
I think the ending is fabulous.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a shock, and it is really good. I don't know.
I think this movie was tailor-made for me.
It's very much like a high school kid's English project.
It's very edgelord.
It is, but it's good.
The sort of final scene, when I said they were wearing those odd breastplates, Gigi starts convulsing and basically runs off set to throw up. Sarah follows her, and then we discover that Gigi has thrown up Jesse's eyeball.
This is an iconic scene.
Iconic.
Hey, go waka waka. You can pinpoint all these scenes, like the hammer scene in Drive, and he loves to put in something memorable that can be referenced on posters and art, and it's good. It's great, even.
The final scene of the movie, Gigi cuts her stomach open with scissors because she sort of says, I need to get her out of me. They've gone so far in their obsession and their lechery that her body is rejecting this because it's not natural. And then I think the final scene of the movie, we see Sarah eat the eyeball that Gigi has thrown up, and that's the Neon Demon.
That's Jackass Presents the Neon Demon.
Literally.
Freddy Got Fingered ass movie. It's really good. In terms of Refn's filmography, it's on the lower end for me.
There are not enough words to say how pissed off people must have been after watching this movie.
Yeah, it's a movie for
about 3 people on planet Earth.
It's
one of them
passion
is
project.
me.
He just doesn't. I think post Drive, he just does not give a fuck about appeasing audiences. He's
I have
making
a lot
art.
of respect for that.
He really does not give a fuck.
A lot of critics felt that the portrayals in this were extremely exploitative. I don't agree.
Who are they exploiting?
They felt like Jenna Malone's character was abhorrent.
No fucking shit.
Exactly.
Guys, I have a real problem with Emperor Palpatine's character. I think
Yeah.
he's just abhorrent. I think Star Wars is exploitative.
Mm.
What the fuck do you mean? She's a bad guy. Of course she's exploitative. It's the whole fucking point of the movie.
I think they felt Jenna Malone was being exploited, which I don't agree with. In the script, the only thing that she was meant to do to the corpse was kiss it, and Jenna Malone basically improvised the rest of the scene.
So then they don't have a leg to stand on.
Well, exactly.
Stupid fuck critics.
Fuck critics. Personally, it works for me. If you're offended by it, I can't tell you that it's not. It's incredibly risque and taboo.
That's the thing, and no one saw it because no one wanted to see it. And fair enough. I don't
Yeah.
blame audience. I'm not like, this isn't a flop that I'm like, oh, it's such a shame no one saw
No.
this movie. Everyone would fucking hate this movie if they
Don't
went to
watch
see
it.
It's a weird 70s Hodorowski-inspired exploitation movie with Kubrick and David Lynch influence.
Yeah.
Like, it ain't for audiences.
No, it's not for anyone.
It's a Nick Refn nightmare project. And he hasn't made a fucking feature since.
So we sort of chose these 2 movies so that we could contextualize. So that we could contextualize the wider filmography of Nick Refn, because obviously you ask people if they've seen Drive, and then you ask people if they've seen The Neon Demon or Only God Forgives, and the only people who are going to say yes are Nick Refn fans or perverts. So, coming off the back of Drive, Only God Forgives made money. This made less money. This made negative money.
I think Only God Forgives they didn't make a lot of money.
No.
I imagine once you take marketing into it, it barely made $1 million.
No, but this movie made even less.
This is a textbook flop.
Yeah, and I can see why. The fact that this was released to cinemas is...
Multiplexes as well.
I saw this, I mean, there was no one in the cinema when I saw this, but it was showed at Odeon.
It's so fucking...
Yeah.
4 tickets to the Neon Demon, please.
I completely understand why my friends were so pissed off at me. This movie is crazy.
It's about modelling and fashion.
But that's what it was. I saw it had Keanu Reeves in it. I saw it had Jenna Malone. I saw it had Elle Fanning.
It's going to be a hit.
It had Abby Lee, and it was about modelling. And I was like, this movie is going to rock. After Drive, I'm so excited to see this movie about the cutthroat world of fashion. And it's a movie about a lesbian necrophiliac and cannibalizing models who prey on a 16-year-old girl.
And when you put it like that, I'm like, this movie's fucking awesome. I don't
It
care.
is. They don't.
I want to be friends with Nick Refn.
I can really only personally successfully be happy with what I do if I approach it like pornography. I just make films about what arouses me.
And I think the thing is, you talk about controversial movies, you talk about movies like Cannibal Holocaust. I don't think Nick Refn is an awful person.
No, he's just an autistic sex nerd.
He's just a sex nerd.
He's just a bizarre man.
He is.
But good for him. I really hope he comes back to making features.
So do I. After talking about these two movies, I'm so glad I enjoyed Only God Forgives more this time, and I'm so glad that I managed to rewatch The Neon Demon. I don't think it's a movie that I'll stick on particularly often, but...
Well, you know, George Miller's back. John Waters is coming back.
John Waters, yeah.
Who else?
We got one more Tarantino movie, I think.
That's not going to happen for 20 years. I don't
20
think.
years.
Yeah, let's get Refn back. That
Come
Amazon
on.
show no one watched and Amazon Studios buried.
Well, this was obviously an Amazon Studios thing as well, so
What
I think...
the fuck were they doing giving this man a budget?
Yeah. I mean, Nick, friend of the pod.
Nick Refn, if you're listening, you're welcome anytime to come to Canterbury. I'll take you to the Beano down the road. We'll get a fry up and we can come talk about the Holy Mountain or something.
Yeah.
Or whatever dumbass movies you're inspired by.
Do it, Nick.
Do it. We'll talk.
I'd like
Mads
to talk
Mikkelsen.
about modelling. Anyway, we're going to sort of round this off with an absolutely obnoxious Nick Refn quote. Pick one of your choice. There are hundreds.
If you're into film, please go do watch William Friedkin interviewing Nick Refn. It's fantastic. I'll put a clip here.
We won't know about Drive for another 30 years.
30 seconds.
Whether it lives or dies. I'm talking about films. 2001 was made in 1968.
I made this film about 4 years ago.
So those two movies are great. Nick Winding Refn, you are great.
We love you, Nick.
I'm so glad that you liked Only God Forgives.
Yeah, so am I.
Full disclosure, I am quitting nicotine at the moment, which is why I'm a bit grumpy. So it may not seem that I enjoyed Neon Demon, but I really did. I think it's great. I'm just moody.
Grumpo.
I'm just a grumpy man. We're going to take a couple of weeks
Yes.
to recoup our brains at Idle Film Club, but we'll come back stronger in a couple of weeks.
Hopefully gonna figure out how to get some video.
If you could share these 5 episodes with anyone you think might like them,
Please don't share this episode.
this episode's going to flop.
Just like Nick Refn, this episode will flop.
And it's fine. We're doing what we want to do.
Yeah.
We'll come back and we'll review some films.
This
that...
podcast is very Nick Refn coded.
We'll review some films that people actually want to hear us talk
We've got
about.
Immaculate coming out.
We've got Immaculate.
Which we're very excited about.
Movies are fucking dreadful at the moment, aren't they?
We've got insert new IP here. We've got...
Is there any movies coming out? We can go see Beetlejuice.
Oh.
We'll go see Ghostbusters, Fallen Kingdom.
Flop.
What's the new? There's so many new things coming.
Loving
out.
it.
So yeah, share these with your friends. The Poor Things episode is probably really good. I think that one's the best. So share that one. Subscribe on YouTube. We'll get some video shit going and keep watching the skis.
Thank you so much for listening. As always, we will be back better than ever after our hiatus. Thank you so much for bearing with us while we figure stuff out.
Idle Film Club. This has been
Season 1.
This has been Idle Film Club Season 1. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Goodbye.
I don't like these movies.
Get real.
Did I saw that movie 20 goddamn times?
Just consume violence. I watch violent movies. Yeah, violent movies are the best movies.
And it's so much fun. And ready.
Oh, this movie's too complicated, ain't it?
So once again, no smoking in this theater.